atheists take this verse out of context all the time. They say, oh, this means that God intends that it's better that we're never born than created or whatever. And it's like, no, you've taken that out of context. So if anyone happens to hear that argument, you've heard it here. Read Ecclesiastes, you'll see it's out of context.
Welcome to the Bible in 1 Year podcast, brought to you by two Brits and a Bible. If you like the idea of a casual yet meaningful chat about the Bible with a couple of mates, listen in. Something on here could be good for you today.
Today starts Ecclesiastes verses or chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4. If you need a brief overview, they are in the description.
So, as has been often the case, just wanted to give you a bit of an overview on Ecclesiastes in general. And honestly, I've been blown away by Ecclesiastes. It's such an enigma because having read through the Apologetics Bible and the Africa Bible back there, there's so much it's just uncertainty with it, unknown. Basically, like, people think it was written by Solomon, but they're not sure it was written by Solomon. They think it was written in the 100 to 400 BC sort of range, but they're not certain it was written in that stage. Like, there's so much, it's like, who knows? Some people think it was just a descendant of David and Solomon. Like, there's just so much that's unknown about it. Having read through a couple of chapters already, I think some of it points towards it being Solomon, but just, no one's hundo p sure. And then the purpose of it is a lot of it is in fairly stark contrast to Proverbs, which just gives you this wisdom is so good and so great and everything. This is fairly like life's just meaningless and we're all ending up in the grave anyway, so why bother? Paraphrasing. But there's also this thing in there, it's like, actually, you know what? Sometimes bad things just happen. There doesn't have to be a reason behind everything from our perspective. And then also there's this, like, life is a gift from God and it's good to be working hard. And so there's like some good life lessons in there, but also, it's just a big old mix up, really.
Yeah, I think that Ecclesiastes was just your typical overthinker, really, and I can relate to a lot of what is said in a lot of this, especially from like looking at my secular view of life to then my Christian view of life and stuff. It's the first chapter, just diving in, I suppose, is just incredibly pessimistic and jaded, isn't it? But I think what's cool about it is it's easy for any of us to see his viewpoint in this way, because we do live in a broken world. But as you say, there are these like little nuggets of potential hope and ultimately glorifying God and putting it into his hands. I'll just quickly do 1:15. I know you've got some stuff before that, Ads, but what is crooked cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted, right? Only Jesus can fix things. Only God can fix anything. So in that sense, he is right that, like, it's meaningless in the sense of we can't make it happen. The meaning has to come from God. It's kind of cool, but also quite depressing in some ways, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I like that, mate. I'm trying to work out whether that's that's good, because you got some more points. I'm gonna save it. I reckon there'll be something better to give you. That's good.
That's okay. You could do. So that's good with a big firm finger, and then like that's okay with like a kind of wobbly thumb.
That's above average. Honestly, my first point, I'm not really going to make it because I know we're trying to stick to the 10 minutes on the buzzer as we can, close. So but it just touched on being wearisome again in 1 verse 8. And then so 1:16, 1:18. In 1:18, honestly, for with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. And this is specifically kind of what I was referring to with the contradiction to Proverbs, because it's saying about how much wisdom benefits us and stuff like that, and avoid folly and all this stuff. But this is literally saying that the much wisdom comes much sorrow, more knowledge, more grief. And I guess it's true. The more you know, the more you see the depravity in this world and the difficulty and the struggle. And I sort of read this as like, this seems like it could have been written more like late Solomon's life, after things have fallen apart a little bit, when things weren't going quite so hunky-dory, that actually this seems like where he had all this positive outlook on life, suddenly it's all a bit more like, oh, maybe it's not so great.
I can see what you're saying. I think they don't necessarily have to contradict, because in a sense, like, the more you know, even though it brings you sorrow and grief. I often think about pastors, right? Like, they're so much more aware of their sin than the average person, right? That it must be actually more painful in some ways, but it's also a good thing that they have that wisdom. So it's almost like the more you realize how effed up this world is, the more you realize how much you need Jesus, and the more that you actually kind of glorify and give it to him. So it's not necessarily a bad thing that you're sad, or if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can see what you mean. It's like, here's all this wisdom. By the way, it's going to make you miserable if you learn it.
Yeah.
Ecclesiastes 2:11. When I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. It reminds me of Psalm 73, which I referenced recently, I think, verse 25. Earth has nothing I desire besides you. So, like, again, when I did this podcast, No Wet Fish, with our mate, or your mate Nathan, but also I would say he's a mate.
Yeah.
So randomly, like, I like Nathan, he's great. Anyway, he said that he thinks that my testimony is quite ecclesiastical, because I, went off and I traveled the world, and I had lots of girlfriends, and I drank too much alcohol, and I had loads of different careers and whatever, right? I toiled in all different ways, and none of it really brought me any meaning. And then boom, I found God, and suddenly life is so much better than it ever was when I was doing all that crap, basically.
That's cool, man. And that's good.
Yeah, I think that was the good one, if there is a good one today for me.
That's sweet.
So, yeah.
For me, Ecclesiastes 2:13 and 14. Wisdom's better than folly, but the same fate overtakes them both. And it's just like, it doesn't matter what life we lead, we're all going to end up in the same place physically. We're all going to end up in the grave, right? And so that's why, kind of what you were just referring to, it's so important to know where we're going to end up spiritually after we die, because it doesn't matter what life we lead, we're all going to end up either in heaven or hell.
Absolutely. That's the only real important question that we have to answer in this life, ultimately. And that in some ways is the one meaning, right? I just had a quick one, Ecclesiastes 2:24. A person could do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their own toil. This too I see is from the hand of God. So, when you discover God's mission for you and you try and walk that path, then that is a gift, and that's maybe where you can find some meaning in this life. Is the meaning that God has ascribed you, but it's hard to find it.
Yeah, true.
Prayer, Bible.
Yeah. I'm going to jump back just a hair for my next one, which is actually 2:19. One who comes after me, and one who knows whether that person. I'm just going to read it out loud because I don't think I said that quite right. I must leave them to the one who comes after me, and who knows whether that person will be wise or foolish, yet they have control over the toil into which I've poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless. And there's so much reference in the Bible about setting your kids off on the right path, making them do the right things, but actually there's no guarantee that they will stay on that path. And it doesn't matter what you've done to work, what kind of wealth you've amassed, and what life lessons you've taught your kids or whoever looks up to you, like, they still have their own decisions to make. They still have to do their own thing. You could work your ass off and build a fortune, but your kids just could absolutely gamble that away for all you know.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. So building a future for your kids in some ways can be a bit of an issue. I totally agree.
And the importance is to focus on your part, not their part.
100%. They're their own person. Ecclesiastes 4:3, better than both is the one who has never been born, who has not seen the evil that is done under the sun. Atheists take this verse out of context all the time. They say, oh, this means that God intends that it's better that we're never born than created or whatever. And it's like, no, you've taken that out of context. So if anyone happens to hear that argument, you've heard it here. Read Ecclesiastes, you'll see it's out of context. And then we got one point that both of us had, isn't it? Yeah. It's 4:12. So a cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. So that's a great image of marriage, really. You've got the husband, the wife, and then, of course, God in the center, the 3 cords.
Yeah, it's something which is mentioned so frequently in Christian marriages. This one can be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves, but that cord of 3 strands, not quickly broken. And yeah, it's just such a good visual again, so true. And yeah, bro, love it. Kush, they are back on the 10-minute train. You're welcome. We're a bit early on that today. Could just filibuster our way through, but let's give you a bit of a break. Tomorrow's readings, Ecclesiastes 5, 6, 7, 8. Get reading.
In the meantime, please consider sharing this with someone to help spread the word of God, and join us on social media at 2 Brits and a Bible.